Hello, my friends. Welcome back. We have been building the card game War for the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. We have seen previously how the computer and the player pick up one card and put it onto the table so that whoever wins can take both the cards back from the table. Now, before moving forward, we will take a step back and look at these two list methods a little bit more closely, append and extend. We have used both of this in this project. Let's kind of step back and understand what exactly do they mean and try to get a little bit deeper into this. Notice we used the append method when we were appending the player card and the computer card to the table cards, because table cards is a list to which all the cards that are thrown onto the table must be appended. Now this was logical because we were adding one value at a time to the table cards. On the other hand, when we got the table cards, back to the player cards or the computer cards, in fact, we did not use append, we used extend. And the reason for that is because remember, table cards is a list and table cards has more than one item. So basically, table cards is, let's say, at least two cards. Or in case of what, the table card could have even 8 or 10, or maybe 18 cards or so on. We want to add this item by item to the player cards or the computer cards, and that time we used extend. So, the difference between these two really is that we use append when we have exactly one value to be added to the table cards or to any list. We use extend when we have an entire list to be added and we want to add it item by item. But then a question that comes up, and it's quite a natural question, can I use or say what happens if I write a statement like a dot append b, notice not extend but append, where a and b are both lists. Now to answer this, I'm going to take a sort of little bit abstract example. But before I go there, we can once again see extend in action. So notice if I look at this, computer has one, compute cards. When I see it has got the two cards from the table into the list here. So that's how it works. We have already seen this before. But like I said, what happens if I were to do a dot append b, where a and b are both lists? Let's take an example. Let's say I say a is 1, 2, 3, b is say 4 and 5. Now let's say I did a dot append b. Now this is very interesting. Notice it does not raise any kind of an error, but what happens is that the entire list b has been added as one item. Now notice this is one item of the list, and I can verify that by saying, okay, tell me the length of a. Remember, length of a was 3 to start with. Over here I appended an entire list of two items, but my length of a became 4 because this entire list is in fact one item. If I look at A3, that is this entire list. So list is like an item inside a bigger list, and that is what has happened. Now of course, I could have done this differently. Let's say I had 1, 2, 3, and B was, let's say, 4, 5. Again, this has to be a list. So I could have done this, like we are used to. I could have definitely done something like a dot append, say for example, B0, and that would be fine because that will make it 1, 2, 3, 4. Because notice here, when I'm doing B0 or say B1, I'm really appending just one value, which is nicely being added to the list. So for example, if I were to do, for example, a dot append B1, then again a becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's because one value is being added. But now, let's see what happens with extend. So if I did, for example, a dot so let me just again define a equals to 1, 2, say 3, and b say b is equal to say 4 and 4, 5. Then I would say, and if I did a dot extend, say b, we already know that this is going to work exactly as though I extended each item one by one. And that's the whole point, that using extend, I can add these lists not as one item, but in fact item by item. Now this brings me to a question that, let's say we did not have this extend functionality at all. Can you think of some code that will still add items to the list one by one? In fact, we have already seen this in action just now. What you can do is to write a for loop to append these items one by one. An even more interesting and perhaps a little bit confusing situation happens. Let's say if I used, instead of extend that way we were doing, if let's say I used append over here. Now this is actually very interesting, very fascinating. However, could be a little bit confusing. But let me just show you what happens if I, instead of extend, if I use, for example, append, right? append, and notice I have a list over there. Something very interesting will happen. Computer wins, but when I look at, let's say, the compute cards, If I look at this list, notice what has happened. Instead of seeing C6 and C9 over here, which I was expecting, in fact, I see an empty list. Now, this is really quite amazing. Basically, what happened is that we appended table cards, all right, which means C6 and C9 were one list. They got added as one item, but unfortunately, I went and cleared up the table card, which I need to do. But the moment I cleared up the table card, even this part of the list got cleared. This could be a little bit confusing, but really what's going on is that append creates what is called a shallow copy. Now, it's extremely important to understand this when you're dealing with lists, especially copying lists and so on and so forth, but this could be a little bit confusing. Now, I'm going to leave you with a very simple piece of code, which is quite thought provoking. Let's say I did, A is equal to 1, 2, 3. I did B is equal to A, and I did B dot clear. Now, notice I'm clearing a B. But look at what happens to A. A, in fact, is also got cleared up because once again, this has created what is called a shallow copy. Shallow copy means that these two are still pointing to the same location in the memory. Like I said, this could be a little bit confusing, but this is very important to know when we are dealing with lists, copying lists, and so on and so forth. If you are interested to learn more about this, do leave a comment and I'll be very happy to discuss this. But to keep things simple for us, in this case, I want the entire list to be added item by item. All I need to do is to not use append, but in fact use extend, and that will do the job for me. So if I did extend, for example, which I was doing earlier, we know that this thing works just fine. So if I did this now, computer one, if I look at say compute cards, indeed I see D6 and DA at the end of this list. I hope you found this interesting. This is quite thought provoking actually. In general, if you find that this way of learning works for you, it makes you think better, do look at our website because we have many such activities where we learn Python programming by building these activities. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.